Welcome everyone to this Force Friday. Today we are going to talk about a very important subject, and that is line. I'm bringing this up actually because after so many years of teaching Force, I have returned, I should say. I've returned to an old idea and I'm trying to surface it more than I have in the past. I've been kind of keeping it under wraps, I have to admit, a little bit, because there's also some downsides to some of the things we're going to talk about, but I feel more confident about it now and a little more safe around it. And I'm going to make sure that you guys understand what the traps could be, so you don't fall into those traps. And I think it's worth doing that in order for you to get the benefits of what we're going to discuss today. So yeah, it's going to be fun. And I think there's some really exciting stuff that'll come out of this. And again, line, I think, is one of the most important things because it is our language, right? It's us translating our world, the models, if it's a real person standing in the same room with you, or if it's from a photograph, we're having to go mentally through the process of, understanding how we're looking at something, have that go through our eyes and our brain out to our hand and come out the other side as a translation. And we're doing that through line. So very important subject, right? So before we get started, let's say hello to our other Force instructors. How's it going, Mrityunjay?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm very excited for today's topic because, line, I'm
Yeah.
roughly so passionate about line myself, like we all are, but I think line is what, like takes me forward. That's what the thing is. So yeah, very excited to talk about it as usual.
Yeah, I think, from when we met you, I think line was one of your strengths, like you came in with a pretty darn good line pretty early on, which is admittedly rare. I think line is something that we usually have to teach a student, Mrityunjay came in, guns blazing with like really fast line. And in a way, I think just your speediness also got you to good line in a sense pretty quickly, because Force line, ironically, is not for the weak-hearted. It's like you have to draw at a certain momentum, especially at the beginning, in order to get a good line. You can't do it slowly. I always talk about like riding a bicycle as a metaphor. I really like the idea of, for those of you that know how to ride a bicycle, the hardest thing to do is ride a bike and go slowly, right? Like the lack of momentum makes the bike shaky, right? And gravity is trying to pull on you from all sides and have you fall off the bike. But once you pick up a certain amount of speed, the bicycle rights itself, right? It ends up moving at a certain speed, and that speed actually ironically fights against like the force of gravity, right? It ends up balancing yourself out. So force is very similar to that. You want to get good force line, you actually have to move at a certain rate of speed in order to right yourself and get the line to a good place. So, and how are you doing, Mr. Swenley?
Good. Glad to be back after going to a wedding party spree this last 2 weeks.
Not only your own, but then the two friends. Like, what's going on over there? Everyone's getting married.
Yeah, and excited for the topic as well. Like I remember one breakthrough moment for me at the beginning was when you mentioned in one of the old videos too, that how key the line is, and to really focus on understanding the force line. And it's such a simple thing, but it can be overlooked, so I would say for you guys watching, don't underestimate what we're going to share today. It's super important to get the results that you see us getting.
Yeah, to Swanley's point, I think we're, as the three Force instructors, those of you that don't know, we do meet once a week also as a roundtable meeting with the three of us, and we brainstorm on the website, we brainstorm on the newsletters and Force Fridays, and that's where all this stuff actually happens, is in our Wednesday meeting. And I think we're making a concerted effort right now, sort of a new push, more new and newly invigorated push towards line and the students we're mentoring, and watching recordings of students doing their work, right? Because you might come in with a drawing that looks pretty decent and some of those ideas look like they're there, but the process with which, or the order with which you're drawing may not be working correctly. And in seeing somebody actually creating the drawing, digital or traditional, and seeing the act of it happening has so much information in it, right? It actually also conveys to us if you're moving right or not moving right. And it actually does get that specific. It's almost like an Olympic athlete, right? Imagine the three of us have just been training to draw for many years now, right? So you're coming to us because we're ahead of you in the training, basically, right? So now we're trying to coach, all right? We're trying to coach the rest of you drawing force athletes into like, how do you do, the stroke correctly once you're in the water? How do you dive into the water? There's very like subtle little unique things that we've learned over time in order to accomplish this, right? So that's what we're going to share with you today. I have basically 4 steps I'm going to try to present you with. And they're actually linear, and that will help take you to creating better line. So let's get to it, right? Let's get over here out of into Photoshop. Okay. Let's see, any questions yet? No. Raphael says same thing as motorcycle. It's very heavy. Yeah, exactly. Just like a motorcycle, super heavy, right? But man, you get up to speed and it's damn solid. It just sits on the road, right? Exactly. All right, guys, so let's do it. So we're here to talk about tips on trying to create fluid line, or in our world, the force line, right? Like, how do we do that? Well, on the website, we talk about skating. Skating is the first step, right? Let's talk about skating and what does it actually mean, right? So I'm going to take you through a bunch of steps here. So number 1, right, is skating. Skating is linear, right? You're actually traveling from one place to another, right? And it looks something like this. Okay. Looks easy, right? But you'd be amazed as to the amount of subtlety that's actually in something as simple as this little path. I'm trying to push into curves and lighten up on straights, and I'm trying to feel the physics of me pushing into those curves. This goes back to the idea of driving a car or riding a bicycle. You want to get a sense of inertia and speed are real, and taking your own personal experience and understanding of that and trying to bring it over to the inertia and speed of the line that it is now traveling on whatever surface you're drawing on, right? So if I go in a straight line, right, I can go pretty fast, but when I hit the curve is where I expend all this energy, all this force, and therefore I end up with a thicker line. If I come in really slow and I go through the curve, well, it doesn't really take much energy to go through it. But the faster I come in, the more energy is expended on that curve, right? Remember, this is physics. An object wants to go in a straight line, right, to get from point A to point B. And you are changing that by changing its trajectory, right? So that curve is where all the burnout happens. Sometimes I talk about this, like if you were driving a car, this would be rubber being left on the road, right, as you went through the curve of the line. So we talk about skating, the skating exercise, and I go through this whole idea of, imagining yourself with your eyes closed, by the way, when you do this exercise. And you really just want to get your brain and your hand to sync up. Again, sounds pretty simple, but I've been doing this exercise for over 20 years now. And it's such a great warm up because I'll find that sometimes my hand is in front of my head. Sometimes my head is in front of my hand. And by closing your eyes, you start to recognize that a little better. My eyes especially are so busy, like looking at things and analyzing things all the time. So to close that down, right, shut down that visual gate and just allow yourself to focus on your hand moving is such an excellent experience. So you want to bring, those two moments together. Bring your brain and your hands together, calm down, focus down, and then you want to find your own natural sense of speed. So some students come in and they have like their skating and it looks something like this. And I'm like, okay, there's no real pressure change. Change didn't happen in the curves at all here. Everything is the same. You're moving way too fast. Then you have other students that come in and they move too slow. And all of a sudden the line is like really wobbly like this, right? So that's not good either. So like I said, you're having to find this middle. You want to be able to go fast enough to get nice, smooth line out of yourself, but slow enough to actually recognize every curve and prep for that curve and then push into that curve and feel it, right? like I said, everybody's different. You know, there's probably some range of similarities to what that speed will feel like for all of us. But in general, some people are a little faster, some people a little slower, right? But we're looking for something like this, right? So that's the exercise. You want to keep your eyes closed, tame your brain and your hand to get in the same place, get to presence and focus, and be aware of your speed. Don't let one thing race in front of the other. Really focus down to like the tip of the drawing utensil that you're using. And try and feel and think and imagine the pressure change of skating or driving, whatever it may be. As you push into those curves, the blades of ice are cutting, the blades are cutting into the ice, or the tires are leaving tread on the road. They're leaving rubber on the road as you go through those curves. And then you come out of that, right? As you straighten out, the car comes off the ground a little bit more, right? It's not digging in. Same with the blade. You get sort of on top of the ice again versus digging into the ice, right? So really great exercise. You know, it's also a great way for you to free up. It gives you ownership of the page, hopefully get you over any kind of concern over your uptightness or neatness of your drawing, right? You can literally move from skating right over to figure drawing and go, okay, let me just try to skate the model, right? And just look at a photograph or look at a real life model and just see if you can flow around, right? Just try to flow around the darn model, right? So that's number one. Number two, this is a new one, kind of a new old one. This one I was referring to earlier. And that is the idea of coming to circles and ellipses. Okay, circles and ellipses. And I want to talk about this one a little bit because there are some pitfalls to this I want you guys to be super aware of. Oh, one other thing I want to recommend is tool-wise, when you are drawing with force, I don't recommend a brush that is super opaque like this. You can see this, you know, it has pressure sensitivity, right? You have thin to thick to thin here, but not opacity sensitivity, right? So that's not good. You know, I'm using right now what I'm calling the Force gesture pencil here, right? So it's got, you know, light to dark and thick to thin on it. There's also like a soft touch pencil here. This one is like super smooth, you can see, right? So anything like that is fine, right? Just don't go to something that's got solid opacity to it, right? Okay, so let's get back to the gesture one. Let's get back to this, right? So circles and ellipses. Circles and ellipses are great. And the reason they are is because it ends up being really a sort of clear path of motion. And I'll make more sense of that in a moment. But they're also excellent for what I call soft touch, right? So here I am, here, I'll start this one over again. I'm creating an ellipse, right? And I'm coming in and look, I'm doing it. You can see the tracer there, right? But nothing's showing up. And then it's like, oh, there's the ellipse, right? And I could see it starting to gently show up, right? And then I keep slowly pushing down. So you can sit here and just keep doing this over and over and really practice your pressure sensitivity. And then what I'd like you to do is take a quadrant, right? I kind of look at this just very simply as like top down, left, right. It's like short axis versus long axis on the ellipse. Where do I want to push in? We want to get a sense of being able to push into a certain area, right? So maybe like here, I'll go in this sort of left corner. Notice I'm still going around the whole shape, and it's allowing me to understand soft touch, and in the middle of a soft touch to push down and to push down, right? Come in it, into it and out of it, into it and out of it, into it and out of it, right? So, you know, and you can do that with circles and ellipses, right? They always say like a circle is one of the hardest things to draw, but if you do it with soft touch, you'll see over time, it's like the skating in a sense. You want to just focus on that shape, focus on your speed, and you start drawing a circle, right? And then you want to figure out an area where you want to push down. I'm going to make this brush a little smaller so I get a little darker here without getting too gigantic, right? I'm going to push here in the bottom, sort of bottomish right, right? And just sit there and practice. Just practice this, you know, get in the zone, put on some orchestral music in the background, right? And just sit there and focus, right? Like so. So great exercises. What is bad about this, okay? What I don't want you to assume here is that these are good shapes. They are not good shapes. They are not forceful shapes. I don't want you thinking, oh, let me draw the rib cage now. Here it is. It's an ellipse. Let me draw the pelvis now, right? I have this circle. Bad, 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 right? Because these are symmetrical shapes, and symmetrical shapes don't present force. They don't show fluidity and rhythm. They're symmetrical. So force is trapped in these two places. I can't get out of them. I can't really connect these two ideas very well, okay? So do not think of it as you're doing this to practice the idea of drawing a shape to get to a place where you can take these shapes and use them in the body as forceful shapes, because they are not forceful shapes, okay, at all. What they're great for is this muscle memory thing we're trying to learn here on controlling our darn hand to do exactly what our head wants, right? Now, what I've started recognizing is that this is something I do invisibly, which what I'm calling invisible paths, right? So let's write that down up here. Invisible paths. Okay. What does that mean? That means I'm going to show you right now what I do that you don't see. Right? It's like the magic trick, what's happening behind the scenes, okay? So let's say I was drawing a model's back up to their shoulder, to a very forceful shoulder. I will come up that back and I'll push into the shoulder, right? So you'll see this. What you don't see is what's going on over here in that whole white area. Well, guess what's happening? I'm drawing an ellipse. Now, I'm not doing it to make a shape, okay? I'm just doing it because it's the most efficient, fluid way for me to get from the end of my line back to an entry of the right curvature to set me up to come into the back and then hit the shoulder, right? So I'm doing this, you know, and I'm like, man, look at that shoulder. I need to push into it. I'm not even thinking about this, honestly. I'm not even thinking about it. It's me having over the last few weeks to go, what am I doing over there? And I'm like, oh, son of a gun. What I'm doing is drawing an ellipse, right? I just keep my hand down on the screen to see what really the path itself is, right? So as I do that and I start drawing the body, now I'm going this way and I'm like, let me draw the back over here. Well, guess what? If I push down, I'm doing that. And then I go, well, and I want to get the back to start crossing over. Well, guess what? That smaller curve from here to here has a smaller ellipse attached to it, right? So there's like ellipse and ellipse and ellipse and ellipse because I'm like pushing this force line down the body, and I'm drawing these ellipses just for me to be able to come in and around again to hit that curve at the right trajectory, right? I'm trying to shave myself back in there, right? So that's what's going on, right? Now, because I've been investigating this, it's been kind of interesting to see how do I do this in other areas of the body, right? So I've been trying to test this out. So let's go back to our shoulder, right? So here's the shoulder, right? So I have the shoulder pushed in there. And then I come down here. Let's say I want an S torso, right? I want to get to the stomach that's over here. Well, I'll do this pretty often. I'll come down. Here's this ellipse. I'm coming down, right? I'm pushing. And then finally I make the jump over. And look what I'm doing. It's a sort of upside down teardrop, right? That's starting to happen. I'm pushing in here and coming across, and I get here and I have to reverse myself. So in a very sharp corner, I come up, I go through this upside down teardrop. I set myself up into this curve, right? It's almost like there's its own sphere, not sphere, but circle or ellipse there. And I sweep down into that curve and I come down, right? And this is the pattern that occurs, this invisible path, right? So there's all this flow going on, right? So now I'm like here, I did this, I kept, you know, creating these ellipses like this, right? I'm pushing down, all of a sudden I have this over here, right? This is all the invisible stuff that's going on. If you didn't know any different, what you'd see is you would see this. Right? Like this is the stuff that you would see, but I'm moving like this, right? So I want you to be aware of these invisible paths, right? Now to continue this idea, so once I get up this shoulder and I want to get, let's say there's an arm over here in this circle, within that circle, right? I come up over the shoulder, and you can see I'm drawing this almost a circle here, and I'm pushing. My first pass into that arm is something that looks like this. This weird little loop-to-loop that I do, right? It's like an airplane, right? I swoop down, I loop my way up because I want to re-enter the curve of the arm, right, all the way up here and swoop down into it. And I don't really overdo that or do it over and over again. I kind of do it the first or second time just to kind of ease my way into that next place in the body. And then I'll go and like connect more directly like this. But I don't usually do that on the first pass. I usually go like this and come up. I think because it allows me to back up the arm and get to the beginning of it, right? To get to where it truly starts. So I get some line in there, and then I further create the river, right? I create the flow from one place to the other, you see. So invisible paths, circles and ellipses, right? Super important. And that they are creating in those invisible paths. And the circles and ellipses themselves, great hand exercises, great way, again, to create focus. Great way to learn soft touch. Excellent, excellent way to learn soft touch, right? Because you're slowly building up and you're going around the orbit of this planet, right? So let's talk about that a little bit further. So I'm doing this orbit, right? Here we are going around Earth, right? I'm going around Earth. At some point, I have to leave to get to the next place, which is this trajectory here, this slingshot idea that they use when they're dealing with satellites and astronauts, right? They'll use the orbit, and the gravitational pull, and knowing when to particularly leave that pull to slingshot, to use the speed of that, right? The speed of that ellipse to slingshot themselves over to the next gravitational pull, right? Well, guess what? That's something that those of you that are on the website may have already learned. And if not, we call this next exercise the roller coaster, right? So the roller coaster. The roller coaster has all these great benefits. The new one that I just shared with you, and let's talk about that first, and I'll talk about some of the older reasons we've been doing it. So with the roller coaster, I'm now combining the circles and ellipses with skating, right? So we want to get a path, a path, right? But we also want to hit those curves on the path. So now there's more effort put into those curves, and we can use the circle ellipse exercise to push into those moments, right? So, you know, I might be up here on a roller coaster ride. Here I am in this little car, right, with little wheels on it. And I come off of it, and right away I'm like, let me see what this ellipse is. As I push down into this, right? So here's the ellipse, but I'm pushing in. Not very strong ellipse. You can see it's very open, really wide. And then I'm going to drop down, and I'm going to get to this next one. So I've left, this is the slingshot moment. I could have left here. I could have left here. I could have left here. I decided I'm going to leave here, right off of the top crest of the ellipse, and I'm going to drop. I'm going to fall down into here, and then I start working on the force of this. I really want to feel that force pushing down into that ellipse. Now, from here again, I can decide to slingshot out of that orbit anywhere I want. I can continue this curve and say, well, I want to go over here, or maybe I want to go and break it early and go over here. Maybe I want to point my way up over here, right? And I can figure that out as I'm circling my way around and I'm pushing down there. I can go, I want to leave right here. Boom, right? So I leave over there. I go to the next location, right? So there's almost like these little planets in here, right? It's like different planets, and I'm slingshotting myself over to the next place like this, right? This one I'm going to go drag further. So let's say this one I go around and around and around, and I'm adjusting. You can see I'm starting to push it this way, and I'm going to cross over. Maybe I loop to loop. I get into another place like so, and then maybe I come down here and I get to the next place, right? So you can see this is super effective. I mean, this is basically drawing force on the body. This is really what the experience looks like and starts to feel like, right? You're moving from, you know, the energy in one place. You're trying to build up that energy, understand its force and its applied force, right? Its strength. Applied force, by the way, is where I'm really hitting the strongest power in each one of these ellipses, right? It's like where I'm pushing down is where I'm saying that's where the most power is hammering into this ellipse, right? Into this curve, right? So I'm building up that applied force and then escaping out, right? Allowing that idea to slingshot me over to the next place in the body. Now, This is just the line portion of it, of course. What you need to learn on top of this would be, well, where do I go in the body, right? That's where all the different templates come, and you start learning about rhythms and so on, right? But this is the setup, right? Now, last but not least, there's one last tool I want to talk about. So, and that is just the simple trajectory curve itself, the force curve, right? So let's discuss that. So if we just go to the force line, let's just talk about the force line. A force line could be straight. It could be like this, pretty darn straight line. It may look like I'm going like this, up and down on it, but I'm not. What I'm doing is, if I want to go down with the line, I'm pointing down, then I go up on it because it's a straight line, right? The fastest way for me to get from top to bottom or beginning to end is just to go straight back up, because there's no ellipse here. There's no curve, right? So the fastest way for me to get up there is just go straight up again. So if I draw up, for instance, it looks like I'm on top of that same line, but I'm actually only touching the screen in that one particular direction, right? Because there's always a beginning, middle, and an end, the beginning, middle, and end. We're always trying to move, right? We're trying to move from one, you know, in this case, we're trying to move from here to here, right? From what I call A to B, right? We're trying to move from A to B. This changes very quickly, though, into circles and ellipses, right? So if I take this line and I'm doing this, I'm still kind of up and down. If I start to curve it, look what starts happening. See that very long, skinny ellipse, right? And if I curve it more, and now I'm starting to move into ellipse land, right? So the more curved the line becomes, the more an ellipse starts to appear in there, right? A rounder ellipse, right? So all of a sudden the change went from me, let's say, going up here and circling back, but right on top of the line to get here, to the curvature being enough for the fastest way for me to get down there is through an elliptical motion, right? So something to be aware of, right? Sometimes you want to chop at the figure, you know, in a way that's more stiff, you know, like, and clearer, like with sharper points and angles, and feel the forcefulness and structure of that. And then there's other times where that curve is going to start dealing with ellipses. And last but not least, those ellipses then finally graduate you through to doing the roller coaster, right? Which now I'm kind of adding a new metaphor on top of, which is the this orbiting, right? Orbiting of planets, basically, right? So in totality, to look over this whole thing, what we're talking about is, number one is skating, right? So skating, you're moving linearly, you're trying to feel speed, you want to time yourself out, right? It's like, I'm here, 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 right? And I'm like pushing into these curves, right? And I'm moving and I'm getting a sense of that speed, right? So you got skating. Lots of different metaphors could be here: skating, skiing, skateboarding, anything that means you are traveling, right? And you're going through curves while travel is going to feel the same experience because of physics, okay? Number two is the circles and ellipses, right? So circles and ellipses. So now we're doing this, right? We're soft touch, right? Soft touch, getting used to where to push into a curve, right? And you want to experiment here, different widths of ellipses. You want to experiment with different sizes of ellipses, right? Skinny and long, short and fat, right, or wide. More circular, less circular, and so on. You want to control pushing into a certain area, right? Lots of awesome benefits come out of that. Number three is the roller coaster. Roller coaster. Roller coaster is basically skating plus circles and ellipses equals roller coaster, right? So now we're doing this. And then where am I going to? Here, I'll put orbit under this, right? So we orbited planets, right? Now I'm here, right? Now I'm gonna go further around. I'm gonna loop it and go, now I'm out over here. Now I'm going over here, right? So combination of the two, okay? This, by the way, is great. This over here, circles and ellipses, roller coaster, excellent for leading edge, right? For the leading edge in the body. Last but not least, number four. Number four is the actual just directional force line. Directional force line. which by the way, all of these are built off of in some amalgamation, right? This is kind of the bones of it all, is just understanding the force line, getting A to B, but recognizing the back and forth of it, the top to bottom that I just showed you, really happens when it's more straight. And as it starts to curve, you know, as the line gets curvier, suddenly it starts taking us back over here, right? So there's the process, right? Here's everything we've talked about today. Skating, circles and ellipses, the roller coaster, which is a combination of skating and circles and ellipses. And then finally, the directional force line itself, right? And how to like use it and recognize how fast it's easy to sweep it into circles and ellipses, right? For the speediness, really, and the efficiency of you creating good line, right? You want to be in flow. As I showed before I move on to drawing the figure for you, just in closing here, this invisible path idea is this other piece that we're all sharing with you today to show you just how much of this stuff goes on that you don't see, right? You're always witnessing the lines we're creating, but I want you to be aware of the lines that you don't see that we're not creating and how we move, right? How Swanli Mrityunjay and I move in order to create the lines that you do see, okay? So here I grabbed an image, right? And I just thought I would move around here just a little bit just to show you like what I'd be doing. I'm going to try to do it with full transparency. So here I'm like, here's the edge of that rib cage, right? It's this giant ellipse. It doesn't even match the body, right? Like look how far out that curve is. There's nothing to do with his body. This has to do with his body. From here to here does, right? Because I'm thinking about this big arc, right? And then I want to push into this shoulder that's over here, right? So now I'm like this. If I draw the whole thing, you'll see I'm pushing in like this, right? And then I want this straight line. This is straighter. So here I'm actually rocking back and forth, right? I'm going back and forth, back and forth. You see here, I've got this big curve. As I try to build it up, I keep coming back to that ellipse. As I go down, I'm drawing this ellipse, right? As I go down further, I'm drawing this ellipse, you see? Right, and that's keeping me moving, right? I think the secret here is look how that keeps me moving, right? So, you know, I just want you to see that this is how it happens. This is what goes on. Here's the back, here's the spine. So there's like a little ellipse in there, right? Because I'm doing this, right? Here I'm curving like this. So even going into that concave of the lower back, there's an ellipse attached to that, right? Even a small moment like this would have a little ellipse attached to it, right? So just constantly flowing, constantly circling around, circling and flowing, right? We've got his deltoid here. So even that would be a small moment. If I'm more direct and I do it in 1 or 2 shots, I really don't need the circle ellipse. But as I'm building up and I want soft touch, man, that's where it really shines, right? This is a longer, straighter curve. If I were to draw the whole thing, I guess you could see I'm really doing that, right? I am drawing this longer curve, and that gets me like, let's say into his hand as an example, right? It's a little flatter than that, right? Here I'm going to come off the back. We've got his neck and his head. Right, I'm drawing that line, even in roundness. Yeah, so by the way, and even in roundness, circles and ellipses come to play. Like I want to feel the form of his body, right? Always helps there too, because you'll have darker line in the front and lighter in the back, right? So here again, deltoid, you know, arm. If it's straighter, I kind of go a little bit more back and forth, right? If it's curved more, all of a sudden the ellipse starts to show up. If I need to draw it with more applied force, right? I want to take an opportunity to build. Well, guess what? Then that's where I do more ellipses because I know I need more passes, right? I start creating that invisible path and my muscle memory gets built up in order for me to draw that, okay? All right, so that's everything I got. You know, hopefully this makes sense. I want you to be aware of this line journey that you yourself can take. That is how we get to the stuff that you're seeing here, right? How we get to this place of drawing these figures that look like this with this kind of line, because we're drawing in these senses of motion. Now, I should probably close with, that's great. We had all this conversation about line, but the line has meaning. The line is force. It literally is the idea of physics and force, and that's why it looks like that. That's why it has this sense of movement in it and speediness of it. It's why I'm moving the way I'm moving, because I'm trying to flow and create energy, right? So that's how we're getting here, okay? All right, so thanks for your time on that. Let's take a quick look at the chat, just see if there's anything we need to answer here before we move on to Swanli. All right, I left over here with the motorcycle, practice for the premium workshop, feedback for this work on. I wish Procreate Video was in real time instead of time lapse. Yeah, it's too fast to, yeah, Procreate does have that problem in a sense. Is it okay to soft touch during blind drawing the pose, or is it, no, I would think that would be great. You know, go for it, you know, it's totally fine. The more you soft touch, look everyone, the more you soft touch, it means the more you are drawing, and the more you draw, the better off you're going to be. You're getting in practice, and soft touch is such a great tool for that. You're getting in time, right? Like quality time on practicing your hand control. So go for it. Man, getting my lines right is one of my biggest issues, especially trying to round out cylinders. Yeah, so for blast radius, this is an excellent exercise, right? Super excellent exercise. The trick to getting those radiuses and ellipses correct is soft touch. Come in gentle and control the line, and then start to push your way in, right? Counter posture, something I've been thinking about line is how one of its functions is as connecting idea, and how the truth is to be found in the relationship with things. Well, hopefully counterpose to this whole idea today with the roller coaster and orbits, you know, helps you understand a little bit more of the synergy, right? The connectivity between things, right? Let's see, let's go to camera instead of the drawing. Let's see, what else have we got here? Skating with a figure from reference without lifting your hand is good practice. Doesn't need to be proportional, just need to feel the control speed. Yeah, totally agree. Swanley responded to that. Don responded to Matunje. Swanley went to Panaboy. Michelangelo, I feel like whenever my brain tells me to push down, my hand is always a little delayed. Yeah, so there might be a thing there about, again, the disconnect between your hand and your head. For you, your head might be faster than your hand is, right? So there might be this sort of relay that you just need to, you know, to work on, right? Bruno, any tips on how to get the apex right? I feel like my curves are still a bit too uniform. Yeah, great question. And everything I shared with you today is that are actually skill building skills, right? Exercises to do so. So Bruno, soft touch is such a great way of getting the right apex, right? So now if you're coming in gently, you recognize that the apex is too wide, right? You just go light and stay light until you get that apex as tight as you want at the top, right? Soft touch is iteration, right? Soft touch is iteration within the drawing itself. So if you're drawing gently, you can see what you're doing. And that's really where the secret sauce is, and you guys learning quickly, is to see what's actually going on in front of you, outside of your head, outside of your body, on the screen or on the piece of paper, and adjust and adjust and adjust and adjust. That's how you learn, right? You don't learn by just watching videos or just having great intellectual thoughts in your head. The way you learn is by seeing what you're doing, right? And changing it and improving it, right? Okay, let's see, anything else? Great stuff, really builds off the stuff we've previously been learning about skating. Yes, thank you, Vanilla. Michael. Edward, to try and improve my accuracy and speed, I've been drawing between points, 2 for straight, 3 for curves. Yep, we talked about that in the past in these videos. That's also excellent. So those are those trajectories. So the invisible side of that 1, 2, 3 point thing, the flip of it is to get the rest of the ellipse in there, right? The rest of that ellipse will now kind of create that full 3-point trajectory that we talked about earlier, right? Exactly. Okay, looks like that's everything. So I'm going to hand this over to Swanley. Let me hand him power here. All right, it's all yours, Swanley.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Let's see, let's go to Clip Studio. I put your guys' talking heads up here. And today,
talking head.
So I'm going to be test driving the Force Gesture pencil as well. And someone asked about the brushes. They will be available soon, so keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, coming out this month. We've resolved not July, but August. We will be launching new brushes. Exciting.
So for me, the line, the idea of line, it was an interesting journey for me, because when I came in and started force drawing, I was drawing more from what we call like the shape chopping point of view. meaning that, if we were to draw this pose, I would say, well, I'm going to draw the back, and now I'm going to draw the top, and then I'm going to draw like the straight here, and none of this bad. I mean, I'm drawing with very clear A to B strokes, so I would say, well, let me draw the top of the pelvis, step down into the socket for the thigh, so again, very clear A to B ideas, and I'm kind of like chopping the figure, kind of like carving it out with these shapes, and it's funny because for me to show you guys how I used to draw, I have to go back and think about how I used to think back then, which is not always like an easy and obvious thing to do. It's like when you ask a pro to do like a bad drawing, then you have to think about a bad drawing. What does that look like?
Yeah, and I would say, you did this for a long time, and it still leads to relatively successful drawing with clear line. You still have rhythm. You're still going to get through the body. There's still flow. It's a little more hidden in its length because of the shortness of the ideas of the lines, but they come together to make sure everything is working, right?
Yeah, indeed. And again, this is a great way to draw. Like nothing wrong with it. It's just one way to use the line. So I would say, well, I have the spine, and I can like carve out the fore shape of the heads, and here we would have the neck. And again, nothing wrong with it. Good drawing, the rhythms are there, good shapes, good silhouette. And the funny thing is, in teaching force basics over and over again, and doing the skating exercise, not just for myself, but a lot as demonstration for students, I started to like expand my vocabulary with the line in a sense. So the way I would draw now, I would go for longer paths, and again, that's the skating idea that Mike showed earlier, so by practicing this over and over again and demonstrating it to students, now I'm approaching the figure more from this with this mindset, so instead of just having the arc of the back, I would see a longer path. I would say, well, I don't only want the arc of the back, but I want the top of the torso also in that path, and I could even say, well, I'm going to draw it like this, and then draw the compression, and then I'm going to get like this fluids connection from the stomach into the V shape of the pelvis. I might even go around, and instead of like chopping out the leg, I would say, well, I'm seeing this path right now from the bottom of the pelvis into the sockets, and I could go from here to here, and I would just skate my way into that foot, and this is great for faster drawings. Like it's much faster for me to skate around the page, and get the pose down in a very fluid and more liberating way actually than what I was doing before. And at certain points, like notice with the arm, I'm still getting back into the more like shape chopping idea, but it's a combination of the two for me now. I'm using that shape chopping, and I'm using the skating idea as well, and it leads to slightly different shapes. Like I said, I expanded my vocabulary, so now the drawing would look something more like this. And even the shorts, for example, like I can see this as one big S curve. This is the skating idea. I'm speeding up over the thigh, and then it's falling down and it's hanging. And notice the thick to thin variation in the line. So again, very subtle things that is easy to like miss if you didn't go through the exercises that Mike showed. So the way that we draw, it's easy to like underestimate the importance of those exercises. Some students embrace them and others fight them and think they're too like oversimplified, but that's really it, guys. That's the bread and butter of what we're doing.
Can you leave this up for a second? There's something I want to share here that you said. Swenley started over here, right? And what he did before is he went from here to here, right? He chopped this up into two ideas and he recognized, oh, I can glue these two ideas into one idea, right? So that led him from here all the way down and around to like here, right? And then like he said, there could be compression here, which is kind of like an exclamation point to that big idea. And then you can invert this, right? Which he started doing. So I could start back in the same zone and now go this way and go, well, that's now this big idea. I could even start all the way here and just kind of flip the idea, right? Instead of going up in the shoulders, go down to the pelvis. So really we have like this big curve, this big curve, right? So two big curves, and I pretty much have drawn majority of the torso. Now, my forever long frustration is I get that. And it's really hard to kind of just draw the whole thing, right? Because it'd be great to just say, well, now let's take those two big ideas and make it one idea. Go, oh, like here it is in the pelvis, it pushes down, it comes up, it pushes over and comes around. That's really what we want, is that idea, right? And then this compression piece fits right in there, right? It makes sense to working like that. But it's hard, it's hard to go that long physically. Mentally, I can make that jump, I can understand it. And I like that challenge, that's the struggle. I'm always trying to push myself against my limit of how long are my ideas in the body? How far can I take them in the drawing? Because with practice, you end up looking at the photograph and you kind of already know like how everything works. I look at this pose and before I draw it, I go, okay, I see the whole ride. Like, here's the ride, I get it. I already see what it is. Now, how can I pull it off? How am I going to execute on translating that into line? It's one thing to see it, it's another thing to do it. And I guess I just want to add, what we're trying to do is go as long as possible. And by drawing with all the different skills we talked about today, what you're doing is you're extending your thinking, right? You're extending the length of the idea and you're trying to go longer and longer because why? Because you want to understand the whole body. We want to understand this, not parts of her, right? We want to understand the whole thing, but we're only human. So you need to draw a line to get through the parts to make the whole, but you want to get to the whole, right? That's the goal the whole time. So anyway, thank you, Swenley.
Yeah, that's I would say that's one of the major things that kept coming up during mentorship while watching the students draw, watching recordings of them draw, so they would draw the back for me to look at, and I see them doing this.
Right, exactly.
And I'm like, think bigger. In the time that you take to do this, I would have gotten the whole thing already, not on the page. Right. So thinking bigger makes you more efficient. You're expressing your idea in a much clearer and efficient way, and then you can move on to the next thing. And this comes out of fear. I want to get that back to look exactly like I think it looks like on the photo. It's that fear, that hesitation, and I'm like, just get the darn line down and let's continue going. So the skating idea found its way even into my like more stylized design work. Like if I want to draw more stylized arm, for example, I can create those shapes through skating. I'm not limited to just the chopping anymore. That's in there. I mean, at certain places I might use it, but I can easily like skate my way around. And like I said before, it led me to, I would call it like more interesting ideas, more nuanced than before. So yeah, hopefully this helped you guys. And I would encourage you guys to practice all the stuff that we showed you today a lot. Don't underestimate those exercises. That's what's going to get you here. And if anything, think bigger. Don't scratch your way around the line. just think big and get it done with. Okay, I'm going to give Mrityunjay enough time to draw as well.
Thank you, Swami. That was great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Let's give Mrityunjay some power here. Okay, it's all yours.
Okay. All right, that was great, Sunday. Really amazing insights. Now, so I think Swanley and Mike covered most things up, and I'm very philosophical about line myself. Always talking about how like the drawing, the idea of drawing is not changed from the Neanderthals, like from the cave paintings to this particular day. It's used for communication, and that's what's going to be the reason for the drawing. And so we can say drawing is a language and line is the vocabulary of it. So, it's like the better your vocabulary is, the better your communication is, and you're basically communicating with viewer with the use of line. Okay, that's why that's why it is so important, and it's such an underrated thing that people kind of misses out. So let's. I'm just going to be talking something about the invisible paths that I use, personally, that I like to use. And I'm choosing the pose accordingly, so I can show you. So one of the things that I always teach is, obviously we all teach, is just to be loose. Okay, so loose means you don't have to like stay within the, the confines of the model and say, oh, you have to do this, you have to do this. And even if you're skating, you're only doing this, right? That's not something that you should be doing. Okay. First of all, draw the energy. Okay, draw the energy. It makes sense, right? Logically, because you're learning how to draw force. So first learn to draw force, right? I mean, first learn to draw energy, then find the body inside it. Okay. So instead of that, what I just like to do is just flow around. Now see that thing in there, you remember something's coming to your mind. This is the ellipse that we were talking about in the beginning. But now this red part here, this and like this part here, this is invisible to you, like nobody sees this. Okay, so I'm only drawing this upper part here, but when you see my brush actually moving, you see it moving in this elliptical path. Okay, but this red part, I'm not touching on my screen or paper what I'm drawing on. I'm only touching on that upper part where I can connect both the shoulders in. Okay, so this is what you see. So this is the ellipse that I was talking about, like we were talking about before. Okay, so let's see what I can do with it. So here's the ellipse, and see how I'm like pushing into this here. And I'm gonna come off and see how I'm like connecting this. Not connecting. I'm kind of like breaking that one idea into like two there. Okay, because I really want to like push in there. I'll be like drawing this invisible path for you today, right? So because we are talking about that particular topic. Now see what I'm doing. Even I'm drawing the spine. Now spine is just this single bone, right? This center running down. But look at my invisible pad that I'm drawing. Now I'm not exaggerating my ideas for today's stream. This is actually what I do. Okay, so even if I'm like drawing this spine here, you see there's like a twist which is happening in the model, and for that particular reason, I'm like revving it up, just like layering it up. So again, there's another ellipse that I'm using in there. Okay, so coming from there, now I'm just gonna be drawing this here. Okay, you see like the skin crease in there. I will make it full screen. Okay, make it a little bit shorter so you can see the whole thing. Okay, right there. So you see already already drawn two invisible paths here. First one in the shoulder, second one for the spine, and how I'm just like building up those lines. Okay, right there. The second thing, the second ellipse that I mostly, that's not like, oh, then my process like fixed and I'm always staying to the same thing. But this is something what I usually do. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So I do it for shoulders, I do it for the pelvis here as well. Again, remember, you see, there's another ellipse that I'm kind of like building up in there as well. Okay, so here's the butt crack. And there we go, so basically this is the figure that we are going for. Okay? It's an S torso. You see, something as simple as just doing this. When we are teaching students, we are saying, oh, with an S torso, the force goes here and here, right? But something as this, how much thought it's actually taking, how much work that it takes, like behind the scenes. So it's mostly like you see a movie, it's like 90 minutes long, but it took like 3 years or 4 years to make, right? It's basically the same thing here. When you're saying, oh, here's an S torso, a lot of thought goes behind it. Okay, so finally we are here. We're pushing onto this force here. Now, very interesting thing that I also do while in the legs, especially when I'm drawing this outside inside outside template. Many of you force guys like who've been on the website and being a member or the mentee, like know this template already. See, I'll see when I'm doing this. Now, the result is going to be this. Okay, this is what we teach. There's an outside force, inside force, and an outside force. But the way I drew it, it's not like that. I don't draw it like this and this and this. Okay, which students used to do a lot. I'm doing it like this, right? So see, like it's almost like there's so many wires hanging down. If you see, like if I start to draw my invisible paths, all of a sudden it's like, oh, what is that, right? But that is how I'm doing it. So to make it in a slow way, like to draw it in a slow way, in a slower speed, this is what I'm doing. Okay, right? Nothing, I mean, if I don't like push in the line, nothing resembles like this template here. Right? But that is how I do, so this is all the invisible path that I'm drawing, basically. Okay. All right, I think the angle here is wrong, so I'm just gonna fix that really quickly and draw the other leg too. So it's a little bit to this side. See, I'm doing this again, but these paths again, I just have to mark it with some else. So these paths here, this, this whole loop that you see, and then this loop here, this is all invisible to everyone. Okay? So I do that, and for the other leg, see, I'm doing the same thing, right? It's like that. You see, like those paths. I was like, oh, what the hell? It doesn't really look like an outside. It's an outside, but see, like the ideas are still there. What I'm saying is, here's an outside line, there's an inside curve for the knee, and here's an outside for the calf. Okay, right there. Now this I'm blocking this with the color here. This all things like these loops are all invisible. Okay, for you guys. Now, what is the benefit of it? Like, yeah, it really gives me this sense of openness and sense of freedom. Even I'm using the same templates again and again. See, like these templates are fixed, okay? And every pose in this world would fit in these templates. So this is a way to make it interesting, okay? To just flow around and have this freedom and to make it more and more interesting, and not to be just again staying within the rules. And that's what we do. We teach like how to have fun, while having the high drama and high speed and saying something like that. Do you have any question? I don't think so.
No, everything's been going well. Good job. Yeah, I think like you're showing. I think that invisible path for me, it's preparatory. It's the preparation of kind of flying in and getting ready to get in the trench. I mean, you see this in movies. I even can think of Star Wars. It's like an X-Wing fighter getting ready to go in the trench in New Hope, right? Like they come sweeping in on a curve and then come down into that line, right? Like you have to hit this arc to come down in preparation for the entry into the line, because these lines have to have speed on them already before you put the mark down, right? So you're like trying to come in at that right trajectory with the right speed before you hit, which means there's an invisible path, right? Before you get to that mark. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah. So let's see, okay, we're running out of time, but let's do a quick one for this one and let's see some of the invisible paths that we can bring in here. So again, this is an S torso right here. You see that ellipse happening there again, okay? And you see like Martin's glute is like really contracted, really working in there. So you know, I can just like draw that really quickly. We'll see, like we have some invisible paths and all, just like I said, you know, it's like not fixed and it might change according to pose, you know, who knows? So it could be happening like that. All right, let's see. You know, it mostly happens with arms. I would say for me, it's like mostly happening in the legs. And again, just like what I said, happening outside, inside, outside, actually doing that with it. And then and this front to back. Now, see in the front to back also, I'm not doing this and this. It's very limited to the energy that I'm feeling. Okay, this model is obviously it's able to handle, okay, and my drawing should be able to handle that kind of drama which I'm feeling inside, okay? So only this and doing only these two lines is not going to do it for me, okay? So I have to like throw that energy somewhere. And this is what I do in front to back, okay? You see, like these lines are extended out and might be according to rules of the force. This is not the ideal way to do it, but this is what you learn once you become good at your once you become better at your lines, okay? You start to feel the sense of freedom, you know, and then you basically choose your own paths to do it. Okay, that's what I think that's what's going to make you unique. For example, even with the language that you're speaking right now, everyone's is speaking the same thing, but the way of talking is different. You know, some people use different kind of words and grammar, okay? And that what makes you you, right? And your voice, basically. So before we get too philosophical, I'm gonna hand it over to Mike, and hope you enjoyed my part.
All right, guys, thank you very much. Some great questions and conversation in the chat today. This is really at the core, at the essence of the stuff that we teach, right? We're going back to line. Line is our language. You have to know what to think, of course, in order for this to happen. So that's maybe even prior to this, but this is the physical manifestation of our drawing approach. Our philosophy is to understand and appreciate the physics in the world, right? To see it and appreciate it and romanticize it even, and try to get that down on a piece of paper. And the way we're doing that is with these lines, and these lines are created through these invisible paths, as I said in the chat, as preparation to finally making the marks themselves. So go home, you know, practice the exercises that we shared today. I can promise you, if you actually follow along with what we did today, you're going to vastly improve your line. Okay, and then you want to try to take that and use it and try to bring it to your figure drawings. Sometimes your physical act will teach your brain how to understand something instead of it always being the other way around. It might not be the brain first, it might be your body first that actually understands something. So by you physically doing it, your brain will go, oh, I understand force now. Now that I know what this feels like, your brain starts to understand what you're actually after, and you start to see what we're sharing with you from coming backwards, right? From hand first through the brain into the eyeball, right? So have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you, Swanley and Mrityunjay. Really awesome session today. We will all see you next Friday. Have a great weekend and go draw with the force exercises. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.